Hi guys, my name is Zhivko Todorov and I'm part of LimeChain. And today I'm going to talk about continuous organizations or how we can use bonding curve smart contracts to basically have revenue generating decentralized organizations, be it autonomous or not. Quick question, how many of you have heard about bonding curves before? All right, that's pretty good. And continuous organizations? All right, cool. So really quick, what we do, we're basically a team who loves building stuff, and we build a lot of different dApps and blockchain solutions for other companies. And in addition to that, we have some tools ourselves. We have EtherLime, which is a smart contract development framework. We have LimePain, which is basically a fiat on-ramp tool, and we also have an academy for blockchain developers. We're based in Bulgaria and London, and let's get it going. So I saw this meme on Twitter, and this is pretty true, I think. We want to fund different stuff, whether it's tooling, community projects, bam, let's DAO it. Investment funds, same thing. There's a bunch of different DAOs going all around the place, especially in the last year or so. However, I think a big problem with the DAOs is that it's hard to achieve a sustainable funding model. So you can build a nice hype in the beginning, get a lot of people onboarded, pledge some funds. However, it gets increasingly difficult to attract funds going forward because basically the vote or the amount of meaning or votes that these guys are going to get going forward is diminishing, while the original members get diluted as well. So go forward. And basically DAOs, ICOs, STOs, and cryptocurrency all were born out of frustration with legacy systems. However, a lot of those are still an experiment. So we were basically frustrated with the financial system. We created cryptocurrencies. We were frustrated with venture capital. We created ICOs. We were frustrated with the ICOs. We created STOs. And now we have DAOs out of frustration with the legacy organizational system. And I think we can solve, so we have pretty good examples that we can aim to solve basically the sustainability problem in DAOs with bonding curves. And I have, for the people that have no idea what this is, I have a very brief explanation. Is basically a simple mathematical curve that means the price grows as the supply increases. So you can have this for the buy price and the sell price, but I'll explain more about this going forward. So there are a couple of projects, not DAOs, but projects using bonding curves to basically determine the price of their products. The first one is Affogato. What they do is they sell coffee, pretty simple. However, the coffee packs that they sell, they're represented by tokens. And the price of those tokens is determined by the bonding curve smart contract. So the more people buy coffee, basically the more hype the coffee gets, and those prices go up. However, if the people sell these tokens, the prices go down. Another example is the Unisocks. How many of you use Uniswap? Yeah. So I use it as well. I love Uniswaps. I love socks. But $100 for some sock is pretty damn much, if you ask me. However, it's a good marketing tool. Basically, the guys at Uniswap created Unisocks with a bonding curve smart contracts, and the more people buy those socks, the higher the prices. However, the bonding curves can be used for something, I think, much more meaningful. There was supposed to be a bunch of emojis over there, but for some reason they don't work. So what's continuous organization in a very high level view? It's basically a concept invented by a gentleman by the name of Thibaut Favre. Hope I'm pronouncing the name right. My French is not that good. It's a tool powered by bonding curves to basically achieve ongoing or constant fundraising, to achieve long-term stakeholder alignment, be it investors or employees, to provide liquidity for investors at all times, to securitize those tokens and to be governance agnostic, meaning that it can be a DAO or it can be a legacy organization. So basically, a continuous organization is any organization, whether it's a DAO or not, with a decentralized autonomous trust. And the natural question that arises here is, what the fuck is that? So a decentralized autonomous trust is a smart contract that mints, burns, and distributes security tokens through a bonding curve contract. The contract can have a bunch of functions, and most often those are buy, sell, and pay. I'll talk more about that later. However, it's really important to know that basically the smart contract, or the DAT, keeps a bunch of the incoming cash flows from investors or from revenues in a buyback reserve. Basically, the buyback reserve allows for instant liquidity for the investors who want to go out at any given time. And also, this means that the investors going out, they're not basically reducing the cash flow of the organization itself. So 4 main functions, like I said, buy, sell, this is for investment or selling the tokens, pay for generating revenues, and another one that can be added is dividends. Through the bonding curve through the DAT smart contract, we can distribute dividends to shareholders, and I'm going to show you some real-life examples about that at the end of the presentation. So going a bit deeper, this is a very simple graph from the Continuous Organizations white paper written by Thibault. Basically, we have the investor, let's call her Jane, and she wants to invest 10 ETH into the organization. She receives her tokens. However, we see that Jane's ETH, 90% of them will go to the organization, and 10% of those will be held in the buyback reserve. And basically, the parameters of the buyback reserve can be predefined in the smart contract. So it can be 10%, it can be 15, 20, 30, whatever it is. On the other hand, when Jane wants to sell her tokens, she basically gives back the tokens to the DAT, while the ETH she receives comes from the DAT itself. So it doesn't impact basically the tokens, the cash flow of the organization, because the funds come from the reserve and not the organization itself. Going forward, we have the pay function of the smart contract, which basically shows what happens when the customer of the organization actually pays for a service or product or whatever this is. It can also be investment returning money. So we see that there's ETH or money going into the DAT, and a bunch of those, 10%, are still going back into the buyback reserve. The rest goes to the organization, while the DAT also mints tokens. And this is really important because whenever new tokens are minted, the value of those tokens goes up because of the bonding curve. And this is basically really great for providing long-term shareholder incentives, meaning that if I want to invest in a continuous organization, so my goal would be to wait until the organization, either more people invest or the organization starts generating revenues, which will bring the value of the price up. And here we can see that there is a correlation between the buy price curve and the sell price curve. This means that if I invest now, and if I want to get out immediately because of the buyback reserve, I will have to go out at a really, really lower price, which basically incentivizes me to stay in for the long term. And I would really recommend you guys that you read the Continuous Organization white paper. I have a list of sources at the end of the presentation, and I'm also going to share this in the community Telegram. So the bonding curve smart contract, they could come in different shapes. I'm going to give the examples for 2 of them. Basically, if we see the top left one, it's called the sigmoidal shape, and this basically can be used to incentivize people that go in really, really early. however, to disincentivize gradually the people going late. So this could be, for example, if we have a platform that tokenizes pharma IP or any kind of intellectual property, it can incentivize through such a curve the people that are investing it in really, really early on, and disincentivize gradually people that just want to piggyback that at the end. On the bottom left, this is basically a negative exponential, I believe, bonding curve, and it can be used, for example, for crowdfunding projects to incentivize people early on, however, to not disincentivize, or at least not that much, the investors in later stages. And there's a good article about all different curves and shapes below. So the thing is that bonding curve smart contracts or continuous organization, they can be subject to front-running attacks, meaning that, for example, if I basically send a transaction to invest in the continuous organization, when the transaction is completed, the price of the tokens will naturally go up. However, if somebody sees that this transaction is broadcasted, however, it hasn't been confirmed yet, they can use basically higher gas fees to front-run me and invest before me. And when my transaction goes through, their tokens will be instantly much more higher. And this can be avoided simply by setting a gas limit or having flat or fixed gas fees for investing into the continuous organization. And I know all these sounds are pretty abstract, so I have some use cases. So first of all, this can be a great sustainable funding model. This can incentivize employees because ERC20 utility tokens are great. However, I don't think that they can really incentivize employees because they can be subject to pump and dumps and so on and so on. It can be also, and they're not security tokens, at least not most of the cases. It can also be great for community participation and network effects, investment vehicles, or DAOs. So the first example I have is a brilliant project called Molecule. So what they do is, I think I mentioned it just a few slides before. They basically fractionalize, securitize, and distribute pharma IP. So they basically have a platform for investing into pharma research. And the researchers are basically incentivized through bonding curves and security tokens. And whenever pharma companies want to use that IP, they have to pay. It's a really great project. They just launched, I think, so it would be cool if you guys check it out. Something else that I would mention is a company called Mogul Production. This is a project that we've been working on in terms of development. And it's basically an investment fund that is aiming to democratize the movie industry. So it's basically a continuous organization, and when you guys invest, for example, you get to vote on a bunch of movies to be funded. What happens afterwards is that those movies, or like the selected movies, are going to be funded, produced, and when they generate revenues, those revenues are going to be distributed back to the investors through the smart contracts. Something else that I should mention is a company called Fairmint. Fairmint is basically the child of Thibaut Favre, who invented continuous organizations, and it's a platform for creating and investing into continuous security tokens. So this is pretty much it. Those are my contracts. I'm also going to share the presentation into the community channel, and I have a bunch of sources here which you guys can see afterwards. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. There is any questions?
I was wondering if tokens are tradable on secondary markets. So if you're Affogato, for example, and I buy a coffee from you, can I trade it to someone else? Or is this always banned in the case of...
It's not banned. Good question, by the way. It's not banned. And this is actually preferred or let's say that me as a continuous organization, I wouldn't mind this happening, because it's basically just like investing into equity or investing in a startup. You can always sell your shares or tokens to another person. So it's just an open market. It doesn't harm the organization in any way. Yeah.
So what I was wondering is, if the goal of the bonding curve is to set the price graph in advance,
Yeah.
wouldn't or couldn't these secondary markets emergently create a new price graph that disrupts the original one?
So basically, the thing is that it wouldn't, because when you sell, if you sell your tokens to the continuous organizations, it burns the tokens, and therefore the supply reduces and the price goes down. However, if you just transfer them to another wallet, which would be the case if you sell them to your friend, they wouldn't be burned, so the price wouldn't be affected. It would just be you getting out and somebody else getting in.
Have you looked into shorting on bonding curves?
Sorry, could you repeat?
Shorts,
Yeah.
bonding curve shorts. So you basically bet against the bonding curve. We've wrote a few articles about it. Maybe it's interesting to you guys.
Definitely. Would be glad to chat about this later. We haven't researched it in depth. However, if you guys have researched it, I would be glad to have a chat right after this call. Talk.
Okay, cool.
How does it look from a legal perspective? Like, where would you set up a continuous organization?
It's pretty much the same as a security token.
Okay.
Thank you. One more?
Another one.
How important do you think it is to popularize and sort of make palatable to the mainstream these new paradigms like bonding curves, or will they pick up naturally on their own?
Well, to be honest, I think it's just another experiment at this point. However, I think it's a really, really good evolution of security tokens and DAOs, because it can create decentralized organizations with a sustainable funding mechanism. It can very well disappear, never be heard of in a year or two. But I think this is true for just about everything that we do as an Ethereum community. Do I think, let's say, DAOs are the answer to everything? No, they're just another experiment if we're really, really practical. So this could be a great funding mechanism, and it's, let's say, a more sophisticated security token. So it's essentially alongside the paradigm of security tokens. And whether or not those pick up, we don't know. We see it now that for the Ethereum community, it works great. We're working on a couple of projects with that, hoping that those pick up. However, do I think that it's going to become mainstream? I have no idea. Basically, we're still experimenting as a community.
Well, maybe a better way to ask the question is, can a mainstream, let's say it does pick up, a mainstream user probably wouldn't understand the incentives that make this bonding curve work. So I was wondering, like, how can you really participate in this sort of funding model if you don't understand that you might not want to short at this time and the direction that the curve would go?
Sure. Great question. So I'm not sure that the mainstream needs to know about the bonding curve. It can be created through basically a fiat on-ramp where people invest money and they receive their tokens. They invest fiat money and they receive their tokens. And basically, I'm pretty sure that as with everything that we do, it can be explained into non-Web3 or non-blockchain ways. However, it's still the concept of tokens itself, it's still a very, very Web3 thing. So if you could get around with tokens, you could get around with that. However, I do think that there's still a barrier, which is to tokenization overall and not only continuous organizations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have you looked into meme economy? Meme markets? Because that's having 1 million users and basically using the concept of bonding curves. So
Is it a project?
it's already channel.
Uh-huh.
Basically betting on popularity of memes using the bonding curve.
pretty nice. I've heard of the use case, but never researched it, but I'll make sure to check it. Thanks for that. But it's a great use case. Like anything, you can just bet on something going viral early on and then profit on it if it really, really picks up. Thank you, guys.